There is one particular person in your life that is your greatest enemy, your final boss, if you will. They're harder on you than any critic. They put their wants and needs over yours at every opportunity, and they'll try to control every facet of your life at the expense of everything and everyone you care about. And that person is you. In a different way than you are you. Just let me explain. What I'm talking about, of course, is the concept of ego. And while ego doesn't make you inherently narcissistic or evil or anything like that, it's an aspect of our mind and our personality that tries to step in and take control. When we don't have a good understanding or awareness of our ego, that's when we're at risk of letting it control our actions and say things that we don't mean, and oftentimes even keep us from being the person we want to be. So that's why today I want to share with you my understanding of ego and my struggles with ego, and really how I've overcome them, so that maybe you can defeat your final boss. We can all start being the person we want to be a bit more, and maybe even start showing more understanding to the people around us. So really, what is ego? A lot of people think ego is like an exaggerated sense of self-worth, like being cocky or conceited or having a big head or whatever. And that is what having an unhealthy ego can look like, but really ego is everyone's sense of self-worth. And so feeling worthless and like you'll never amount to anything is God damn it. And so feeling worthless and like you'll never amount to anything is just as much an unhealthy relationship to have with your ego, just in the other direction. So what purpose does the ego serve in the first place? From like a, I don't know, like an evolutionary standpoint, a survival standpoint, ego is like an incredibly powerful motivator. I mean, what better way to survive and propagate your genes than to have a mechanism in your brain that prioritizes yourself over everything else, right? There's probably been a time in your life where maybe the important people in your life didn't believe in you, or you didn't believe in yourself at first. And so you developed a bit of a chip on your shoulder and felt like you had something to prove. And you might have found that the more you fueled that fire, the more motivated you became to conquer anything that stood in your way, right? It's the entire like character thesis of Vegeta in Dragon Ball. He thinks he's one of the most powerful beings in the universe simply for being born the Prince of Saiyans or whatever, but he constantly gets his shit rocked by Goku and every villain of the week. So he handles that bruised pride the only way he knows how, and channels that shame and humiliation and that pain to motivate him to get stronger. I mean, he even got a super form recently called Ultra Ego. Shoutouts to Akira Toriyama, by the way. But in every Dragon Ball story, Vegeta's attitude and motivation and his ego never let him truly become stronger than Goku. Which brings me to why I chose Sonic CD as our game for this topic. Metal Sonic is perhaps my all-time favorite Sonic character. And while Shadow is most often compared to Vegeta in their personality and their relationship with their respective protagonists, I actually think it's Metal Sonic that has the same attachment to ego as Vegeta. You know, this game doesn't really have dialogue, so you could argue that there wasn't any intention yet for Metal Sonic to have his own personality in this game, and that he's essentially just remote controlled by Eggman, but I don't think so. I think there's a reason Metal Sonic kidnaps Amy at the start of this zone. We do see in later games, and Sonic Heroes especially, that Metal is jealous of just about everything Sonic has going for him. And, you know, the Christmas episode of Sonic Mania Adventures suggests Metal might actually have a bit of a soft spot for Amy. But it's definitely less about the affection and just kind of the jealousy and having something to take away from Sonic. But in that episode of Sonic Mania Adventures and in Sonic Heroes and a lot of Vegeta stories, for example, we see the devastation that follows when ego isn't enough. When we fuel and motivate ourselves with jealousy or spite and with negativity in general, and we find that we still don't succeed, we come crashing down hard. You're forced to take stock of everything you went through to prove yourself right, only to find out that you were wrong. And all of that suffering feels like it was for nothing. And the tricky thing about ego is that it also serves to protect you from negative emotion by any means necessary, including reshaping your reality to fit its narrative. You weren't wrong, it tells you. You know, you were wronged. You were cheated. The deck was stacked against you. It's not your fault. As soon as we give in to the comfort that brings, and we stop hearing "it's not your fault" and start saying "it's not my fault," the cycle will repeat itself. I mentioned in the first video in this series of like, you know, playing Sonic while talking about philosophy, that my favorite movie of all time was Spider-Man 2 because of the story arc of Peter Parker finding his purpose in life. I actually didn't really even mention the supervillain plot of that movie at all. That, of course, being the story of Doc Ock, who is maybe the most perfect foil to a protagonist in any superhero film ever made. While Peter struggles with motivation, Octavius is a man of action, right? In his first scene, his wife is like, dude, get some rest. And he's like, well, did Beethoven rest before he wrote the Fifth and all that? And he seems at first, at least, to have, good intentions. He supposedly invented this machine that's going to change the world by providing safe energy and clean nuclear power with magnetism or something. But then he turns it on for the demonstration, and just for a moment, he lets his real motivations shine through with that, fucking iconic line.
The power of the sun in the palm of my hand.
But then the experiment starts to go wrong, and the magnets are pulling people's jewelry and shit into the reactor, and James Franco's like, shut it off! And he's like, calm down, be chill, homie. It's just, it'll stabilize. Because he's in denial. He can't admit that it's going wrong, and it ends up getting his wife killed, and it destroys the inhibitor chip he supposedly programmed to keep control of the AI in the mechanical arms. And it's implied that the arms are evil and they start messing with his head or something. But when you think about it, the arms were always an extension of his ego. He didn't program these arms with an evil personality that he could only keep in check with a single fucking LED on a computer chip. They were just built with a single purpose only, and that was to make the nuclear reactor work. They don't murder the doctors at the hospital because they're cruel and evil. They do it because they're going to be cut off and their survival instinct kicks in. Because if they get cut off, that means they wouldn't be able to build a reactor, right? So Ock has this monologue where he's depressed and disgusted with himself. Ow. And he makes a comment about he and the arms belong at the bottom of the river, and he's being all dramatic. So then it's implied that the survival instincts kick in and the arms talk him out of it. But the delusions the arms feed him are delusions that were already there. He goes from admitting his failure to denying the possibility that he could have made miscalculations, just like the denial he was in while the chip was still there. And so what does his ego conclude? We try again. We go bigger this time, no matter the cost, even if I gotta rob banks and kill people, because I got nothing to lose now. I'm a goddamn sucker for nostalgia, so I loved Spider-Man No Way Home when they brought back Tobey Maguire and all the villains and all that. But one thing I will very much criticize about that movie is how they handled Doc Ock's character, because they got it wrong. They repair his little inhibitor chip thingy, and it's like he was always a good guy, when the whole culmination of his character at the end of Spider-Man 2 is that he always had the ability to control those arms. And his final act is to act out of the interest of others instead of himself. That being said, even that last sacrifice has an element of ego to it, because his line is I will not die a monster, right? He's still thinking in terms of himself rather than the people he's saving. What's your favorite Neon the Rocks video, Sonic? I like the one where he talks about Dr. Octopus for a long time. If you haven't seen Spider-Man 2, first of all, thanks for sticking around. Sorry for the spoilers. But even if you have seen it, a lot of you are probably saying, yeah, good movie, we get it. Selfish bad, selfless good. But a lot of you are probably struggling a lot more with finding confidence and motivation these days than with being, arrogant, full of yourself. And for a long time, I was in that headspace too. And it caused me to dismiss that I had an ego problem. Then I started to learn, like I said earlier, that low self-worth is just as much a consequence of ego as arrogance is. When my friends in high school would make fun of me for being, awkward or wimpy or nerdy, it would hurt my feelings. But instead of standing up for myself and establishing the necessary boundaries in a healthy way, I'd, clap back with something witty that would make my ego feel like I wasn't the lowest on the totem pole. What really opened my eyes to it was once I went to college and made new friends that were, inherently more mature and were actually willing to give me respect from the get-go. I really tried to be, kind and a good friend and show my appreciation, but some of the time that social kind of survival adaptation that I had developed would rear its head. And I'd put my friends down in ways that were, just completely uncalled for. And honestly, I'm lucky that they put up with it. Not just because I'm lucky to still call them my friends, but because their patience and understanding and willingness to forgive are what gave me the space and environment I needed to take responsibility for that behavior. Because it'd be all too easy to make an excuse. Oh, that's how I was made to behave by the people that would put me down growing up. But the truth I had to accept was I decided to start acting that way in high school, and I've unconsciously decided to keep acting that way in college. So if you're one of my college buddies watching this, thanks for putting up with my dumb ass. That's what it ultimately comes down to. You have to one day recognize that your ego, despite how much it looks like you and sounds like you in your head, it actually exists separate from the true you. Your true values are unique to you. You may want to make music or YouTube videos or make your loved ones happy. Our egos, though, they all want the same thing, and that's more. more food, more money, more respect, right? More status, more fame. And when that hunger for more is what controls you, then you give up control. It'll even creep in and corrupt your true passions. It's okay to want to be a YouTuber. It's okay to think making videos is fun, and it's okay to want to monetize it so that you can spend your time doing it. Where we fall into the trap is when our minds start to fixate on the idea of a bigger number, better person, right? And it's hard to beat that temptation. When I started YouTube and when I started streaming, I was so excited when I would get even a handful of views that anyone would watch my crap or hang out with me while I played video games, put just the biggest smile on my face. And while I actively tried to still hold on to that gratitude, once I started to really love it, and once I wanted to spend more time doing it, I let that craving and that desire for more be my motivation. As I got better at editing and better at graphic design and better at the hard skills associated with making content, I got a bigger and bigger chip on my shoulder about why I wasn't getting more views or more income. I'd make friends with other streamers and other YouTubers, and I would keep tabs on their growth, and I would obsess over why I wasn't seeing the same numbers. At first, I tried to appease my ego with it all and tell myself, oh, everyone has their own journey and all that. But at some point, I realized that trying to appease my ego like that is still playing my ego's game. And the only winning move is not to play. I'm not trying to bullshit you and say that I'm like completely detached from my ego or anything. I definitely was hitting refresh on my sub count every 5 minutes or so once it got up to, the 9,900s. All I'm trying to say is that about a month and a half ago, I stopped obsessing over YouTube growth and let all the skills I had built in chasing that growth just fall into their natural place. And I committed to just making the absolute best videos I could make. Not the best in the comparative sense, but in the everything I can think of to make this more cool and more fun and more authentic to the real me, I'm gonna do sense. And while it pretty much instantly paid off in my very first video when I entered that mindset completely popped off, that was just the cherry on top. It was validation for that which I already knew, and that's that I've gotten more fun and satisfaction out of making videos in the last month than I ever have before. Not because I'm looking forward to the upload and getting the results I'm wanting from it, but because I'm finding the satisfaction in the creative process itself. So you don't even have to worry about sacrificing results. A lot of people rely on the power of motivation that comes from ego to achieve their goals, and that's very understandable, really. But as long as you are reliant on that motivation, you're at its mercy. And as we see in Spider-Man and in Sonic, true power comes from taking responsibility over your actions, right? That's why it doesn't matter whether Metal Sonic is intended to have his own personality in this game. Just like Doc Ock's tentacles, whether he's sentient or not, Eggman's got this big ass laser that's apparently an insta-kill, and he had us trapped here at the start of the race. He could have just zapped us and called it a day. But he and Metal Sonic set up this race because they don't want to kill Sonic. They want to beat him at his own game. And what's Omega Galaxy Brain fucking 500 IQ about this boss design is that it's Metal Sonic's hubris that causes him to lose. He's got this dash attack that goes faster than any speed I think Sonic can even reach in this game. And yet when he's winning, he hangs back and does this like electroshock attack that lets us get ahead of him. He's too concerned with making sure you lose to make sure that he wins. While you, the player, can make a mistake in the race's execution, Sonic won this race before he ever set foot on the track because he's there to save Amy and liberate Little Planet. Humiliating Dr. Eggman is just a bonus. Something else that's interesting about Sonic CD is the time travel mechanics, which of course I'm not in a good place to demonstrate right now. I used to not like the time travel stuff, mostly because of like the flawed gameplay implementation, but also because thematically I didn't like the idea that the only way to make a good future is to change the past. Because we can't change the past to solve our future problems. But then I thought about it a little bit deeper, and well, firstly, you can technically change all the futures in the present by collecting the time stones, which is what I'm electing to do this time. There is an even deeper way of looking at it that my mind was opened up to recently that I'm going to attempt to explain just over the course of the metallic madness that I have left. It's the idea that we can change the past by changing our perspective. Our ego usually dictates our perspective, but with some awareness, we can like override it and see things for what they are, or even like what they could be. The other day I was late to dinner with my girlfriend and I was in a hurry, so I pulled up and parked as fast as I could. As I was getting out of the car, I noticed that the guy next to me had double parked, and so now I was double parked, and I thought to myself, you know, man, what an asshole. Like, now everybody down the line is going to be double parked. So later on, as we were done eating, you know, I held the door for my girlfriend as we're leaving, you know, as you do. And she walks out first and she looks out and she goes, babe, you parked like an asshole. And I look, and the guy who was originally parked next to me is gone. And now I'm the one who's double parked. And in that moment, I realized that I had passed this judgment on this guy when he could have just as easily been in the same situation as I was, where somebody else had had double parked before he got there. And then he seemed like the asshole. Maybe a better example is my experience with you know, a previous relationship. My ex had a way with, she had a way of making me feel small. She also had a way of gaslighting. And what is gaslighting but trying to change the past in the present? I mean, after all, if you convince everyone that we all heard a tree fall in the forest, then it must have fallen, right? And what, frankly, a lot of therapy helped me to understand about that relationship is once I was able to see through all that shit and see that relationship for what it truly was, it literally changed what I considered the objective experience of those past events to be, and therefore led to material change in the future. My new perspective on that relationship really helped me in my new relationship, and everything I was able to learn about myself by that change of perspective, it was literally like having new experiences. So I got all the time stones to this playthrough just so I could make a point about the good future in Metallic Madness, and it's the bad future right now. And I don't really know why, thanks Sonic Origins. But the point I was trying to make was that, you know, you can only change so much, right? Because like Metallic Madness exists, god damn it. And just because Sonic is able to make a good future in this zone doesn't mean that Eggman's influence just completely disappears. Just like I can't delude myself or go back to the past and make that relationship with my ex be a healthy one. I can sometimes feel like we all live in a Metallic Madness these days, but I think it's still probably worth trying to make a good future. I really love that Sonic doesn't stick around for like a kiss or a thank you or anything like that. He really doesn't expect anything from Amy whatsoever, which I always thought was so cool because when you played Mario, like Princess would give you a kiss at the end and everyone always made jokes about banging the princess being the reward for beating the game, but Sonic's not about that. It's not about what Amy can do for him. It's that saving her is the right thing to do, and that's fucking awesome. The original inspiration for this video was the idea that defeating Metal Sonic was like conquering your ego, but it's really not about defeating your ego. Sonic doesn't see Metal as a reflection of himself. It's Metal who's defined by his ego being tied to Sonic, and he never conquers that ego. Like I said, the only way to win that game is Sonic's way, and that's not to play. This video is part of a series in which we sit back and play some classic video games while having some deeper discussions about life and creative pursuits. A playlist of the other episodes should be on screen now. Watching them is actually one of the best and easiest ways to support my channel. I'll catch you guys next time for Sonic 3.